What's up guys, back again with another workout today, and today we're going through what's called an anterior workout. So that would be chest, shoulders, and biceps. So basically everything that's on the front. So today is going to be a little bit more incline focused. So we're going to be working on upper chest and then more so kind of front of the shoulders versus lateral or rear delts. So we're going to start off with an incline dumbbell chest press, and we're going for 4 sets of 8 here. So you may notice here that when I start off doing this, my elbow is kind of turned about 45 degrees, I would say. And you want to make sure that your elbow doesn't flare out too much to make sure the shoulder doesn't get involved. But you also don't want to drive it down too low and kind of just push through the tricep, if that makes sense. So I almost try to kind of push through this similar to like a fly or like a pec deck and kind of just drive through with kind of a scooping motion. So I'm trying to just kind of scoop through my chest here and not really think about my hand pushing up and together. I'm more so trying to think about my chest kind of driving everything to the top. And you want to try to make sure that you maximize your mind-muscle connection as best you can. So what I usually do sometimes is I'll kind of think about, before I even start, squeezing my chest and then kind of pushing through, engaging that squeeze at the same time. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll try to push up to the top for the first rep, kind of hold that squeeze, and then lower it while trying to keep the squeeze at the same time. So it's a little tricky, but it takes a little while to get down, but once you can get it, it'll help everything else, if that makes sense. So really with any exercise, you're trying to think about the muscle you're trying to engage and then trying to make sure that you're moving so that that stays as engaged as possible the entire time. So even if you get to the last couple reps where you need a little bit of a gimme, you still want to make sure that you're not just kind of letting other muscles kind of overpower or take the path of least resistance, if that makes sense. So here I think I worked up to some 80s, 4 sets of 8, and you'll notice here I'm starting to struggle a little bit, and I'm trying to just make sure I'm continuing to move with as smooth form and control as I can. But you may even notice, my feet are moving around, my head is kind of grimacing, or my head is shaking a little bit here. But I think that sometimes, even if other muscle groups or other body parts kind of spasm or move around, as long as what you're trying to control is in control, that's all that matters. So moving on now, we have an incline hammer strength press, 4 sets of 8 to 10. And I actually really like this hammer strength press. I will say, sometimes some of them are tricky with the incline chest press machines to get to where your shoulders don't really take over. But this one, I really do feel like I'm pushing the right way, and it kind of swoops inwards a little bit too. So you'll really see with this, I can kind of push myself to the brink of failure, but really have no worries of, messing anything up, or like you'll even see as I get to the end of my reps on some of these videos, I'm really struggling here. But the nice thing is you feel it constantly in your upper chest the whole time. It doesn't really feel like anything else kind of takes over or messes up at all. So I really like this machine a lot, and it's one of those too that you don't even really need too much weight to really isolate a certain area. So I really have, I think, 2 plates on each side is the max I've ever gone. So it feels good, and it's always nice to find those exercises that you don't really need to add too much weight to really feel like you're burning it out. So moving on now, we have a cable fly where the cables are in the top position here. Some people call it incline cable fly, some people call it decline cable fly. But I find that kind of confuses me, because sometimes I wonder, like, if it's decline cable fly, is it decline because of the motion, or is it decline because of the position of the cable? So I usually just call it high position or low position or just middle or something like that. So this is a cable fly high position, and we're going 4 sets of 12 to 15 here. So you'll notice here too, I'm kind of lunging forward, and I kind of go back and forth with this sometimes. Sometimes I'm a little more upright, and sometimes I do a little bit more of a lunge. But I usually find when I'm doing heavier sets, I do more of a lunge, just to kind of put as much power forward as I can. And you'll also notice too, as I kind of come down here, I scoop inwards towards the pinkies, and I just find that that gives me kind of maximum torque in my chest to let my chest kind of feel like it's twisting and kind of squeezing everything together. Because sometimes, it is hard with motions like this to engage your chest. If your shoulders are more dominant, or some people I find that I train even say they feel it more in their bicep or their tricep, and that's just because they're kind of trying to just power through the movement. So you'll see here too that I usually keep more of an open palm, and I do this with a lot of chest or back movements. So the more I can kind of just let my hands just be there, or hands just kind of be hooks and not really grasp too much or grip too much, the better I feel like I can engage the chest. And with this too, I try to just think of a little pause at the bottom, and then kind of holding that squeeze I generate at the bottom as I come back through the motion here. So our next movement here is going to be our seated shoulder press. We're going to be doing 4 sets of 10 to 12. And I kind of do this a little bit differently. So you'll notice here, I usually keep my pinky end of my hand a little bit higher and keep my thumb down. And I'll kind of just let this rest on my shoulder for just a second. So what I find here is that that pause at the bottom lets my shoulders relax, but then they can fire again as I push back up. And I kind of think about coming a little bit inward as I press through. It's not just a straight press up, but I don't want to go too far in towards the center, because then I do feel it more so in my shoulder joint rather than my shoulder muscle. So really I'm just trying to move in a way that isolates that shoulder muscle as best as I can. So I find that kind of having that pinky tilt, that pause, and then a slight angle in as I come up helps me a little bit. So next is a movement that's pretty interesting. I don't know if it actually has a name, but I learned it from a friend, and it's called a seated snow angel lateral raise. So you'll notice here that I'm turning my thumbs upwards, and I'm kind of just keeping my hands a little bit more forward than a normal lateral raise. Whereas a normal lateral raise, your hands will kind of be right by your sides. With this, I keep my hands a little bit more of like a 45-degree angle forward as they come up. So this is a little bit more of a hybrid in terms of your arm position between a forward and a lateral raise, but I find that it really isolates itself well as a lateral raise because of the fact that you turn your thumbs out. So it's more so of a rotation rather than just kind of pushing straight out to the side walls. So I really do like this one because I can really, sometimes for dumbbells, it's hard to really let your lateral head of your delt take over too much. Sometimes I find that my trap and my neck kind of take over a little bit more. So I usually get a better engagement on my lateral raises when I use a machine or especially a cable. But with dumbbells, I find I just don't really get that great of an engagement. So with this, I really do find that kind of just that thumb angle and sitting a little bit more forward in terms of your torso, but keeping your feet back kind of just really lets me isolate that lateral head. And you'll even notice here, I don't really come up that high. It's almost like a partial, like a high partial here. I really just kind of go up to where I feel like my lateral head is like fully squeezed, and then try to just hold it for just a second, give it a little hang time, and then come back down. So moving on here from our chest and shoulders, we're now just going to finish this anterior day with biceps. And this split has been kind of interesting. It's weird sometimes for me moving from like a chest and shoulder to a bicep, but it's interesting to change it up sometimes. So this is just a normal barbell curl, and you'll notice here too that I kind of keep my wrists relaxed the whole way through. With different barbell curls, sometimes I find that positioning yourself differently engages things a little bit better here. And I apologize for my focus too, kind of going in and out on some of these clips. Sometimes it's a little bit hit or miss, and I'm trying to figure that out a little bit better. But you'll notice here that I keep my wrists kind of relaxed, and I tilt slightly forward at the hip, and I find that this almost lets me kind of drag the bar up. And a lot of times I usually get a little bit too much front delt fatigue when I do bicep curls. So the more I can kind of just keep my hips back, my torso forward, and then kind of my elbows tucked in and my wrists relaxed, I feel like I can kind of scoop through with an easy bar in particular and just kind of cradle it on the way up and let the bicep really take over. And with this too, kind of like other motions, I really do put my emphasis into the pinky end of my hand. And for straight bar or maybe a dumbbell curl, I will kind of move a little bit differently, but I find that especially for an easy bar, whether it be a wider curl or a more standard easy bar curl, I find that kind of having that limp wrist and kind of keeping the elbow tucked into your rib is the best way that I feel like I kind of engage. And we're doing our barbell curl for 4 sets of 10 to 12 reps. And lastly, we have a crossbody hammer curl, or as I like to call it, the Baywatch curl, because it reminds me of a slow motion run down the beach. So we're doing 4 sets of 10 to 12 reps. So for this motion, rather than keeping the dumbbells by my sides, I will keep them kind of resting on the front of my thighs and do more of like a forward swivel, if that makes sense. So I'll keep them resting on the front of my thighs, and then I'll think about kind of keeping my hand turned inward the whole way through. So it's not like you're starting and then trying to like hitch it into a different plane of motion, if that makes sense. I'm trying to kind of keep as much of it in that line of movement as I can. So I'm trying to kind of keep my hand turned inward and kind of keep my shoulder already engaged, so that way I feel like I can just use my forearm to then just pull straight up and across. And I like this just because kind of going crossbody, you definitely feel it more in the forearm rather than the shoulder, just doing a typical hammer curl. So this one I like a lot, but I also find that if I do it after a bicep curl, I'll typically get a really good engagement of the bicep and the forearm kind of as one. And usually with a normal barbell curl or easy bar bicep curl, I'll typically feel it more so in the inside of my bicep, whereas a crossbody hammer curl, I can really feel like I'm hitting that kind of peak, that outer head here. So this is one that's become a favorite of mine, and I have a few other forearm exercises that I want to share, but that'll kind of come in later videos. So this is a good one to just kind of cap off a day like this. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you got some sort of tip from it. I'll try to be a little bit better about articulating some of these things, but you know, that comes with practice. So I'll see you in the next video.